Welcome everyone to another episode of The Turning Point. Glad to see that we have already 200 people watching us and we just live for 20 seconds. So I think the numbers are rising exponentially. How are you guys doing today? Finally, we have the four of us again. I know sometimes it's difficult to match everyone's schedules, right? So how are you doing today, Vandell, Versan, and
Hey,
David?
doing good. Good to be back with you guys. We got some interesting things to talk about.
Doing wonderful. Thank you very much.
Yeah, likewise, having an amazing day as well.
hmm
Well, as a matter of fact, David doesn't have his hat today, and I think it's very important to point that out. And Vandel and Versen are together. I think
Yeah.
that's interesting things. And yeah,
Yeah.
happy Monday to everyone. And we have a lot to talk about, so let's get straight to the point. I think we have some topics that Versen has shared with me, and I don't know which order you want to start because I know you sent me the topics before Versen. I think we can start with what happened yesterday, right?
Yeah.
Trump assassinations attempt. Yeah, I think that's
Yep.
very
Yep. So,
relevant, and I would like, yeah, we can get started.
all right. Yeah. So, first of all, before we do dive into today's discussion, I do want to briefly address the issue last week we had. Unfortunately, some of our content was removed. I'm sure everyone is aware of that. And it's just becoming very clear that there are certain topics like vaccines are totally off limits, certain things we can't talk about. So even though the consequence of those decisions are very significant, we have to keep that in mind moving forward. So um, the first thing that did happen and something we do need to talk about is the recent assassination attempt on Donald Trump. There's been a lot of speculation about whether this is obviously staged or a deeper strategy to really influence the upcoming election. And I think it's just important to take a closer look at the motivations behind the scenes of these attacks and really what's happening beneath the surface. So I'll just briefly touch on that. And I think this goes a lot to Trump's early victory, which really took many people by surprise, and particularly because he used Twitter, which was really an unexpected tactic. And instead of acknowledging that he won, there are powerful individuals out there who became very fearful of what he might do to their establishment, the system. And I think this includes people like the Clintons, the Obamas. So if you even recall the famous debate of 2016 when Trump said to Hillary Clinton, you'd be in jail if I was president. And I think that's where a lot of the fear, originally stemmed from. Shortly after he took office, Trump did actually make moves to target human trafficking. And that's something I'm not going to go too deep into, but it's a very notable example being from executive orders that I personally done research and come across of. And I think this is why some people believe in the space that even the FTX scandal was used really to funnel billions into the current administration. And it's why many, I think, of the decisions to like reduction of oil production in the States, cutting natural gas, disrupting supply chains are part of more of a broader narrative to destabilize the economy. The COVID lockdowns, the inflation, the changes to the laws we've been seeing, that pretty much fits the narrative of eroding freedoms. Now, over the years, we've discussed many of these things here on this show, and I think they do connect to some of the attempts now that we're seeing on Trump's life. And I think it's because those in power really do fear, to a degree, his return to office, and because he's going to expose their operations. Now, this is where it gets complicated. We've talked about this openly many times before. And if this is all part of some bigger plan, I still ask the valid questions, like why are we still seeing very heavy censorship? Why are lives being taken and lost if the so-called good guys are really in control? Why does this divide and conquer strategy seem more effective than ever? And these are very valid questions to anybody who's been paying attention to what's really happening in the world. So regardless of where you stand, I think it's very unsettling, though, to see a president get attacked like that and witness the violence. No one deserves really to be targeted. And of course, we have to hope for a better path, even if we disagree with some people in this space about what's really playing out with the Trump narrative. But there is room for people to seek redemption. So we can only hope for that. Now, as we move closer to the election, just 48 days, 47 days from now, we're going to see a lot of things unfold. I think things are going to start to get very unusual because at this point, after this assassination attempt, the gloves are off now, and it's going to be a very unpredictable ride. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you for sharing, Versan. And I'm very curious to hear about David and Vandell. I don't know which order. We can follow the order of the screen, so we could go to Vandell, then we can jump to David, just following the screen order.
Yeah, sure. So what do I think about the event that took place? Well, I'm going to be honest and transparent. Uh, First of all, nobody knows 100% whether it was real or staged, okay? Doesn't matter what side of the spectrum you lean on, you don't know because you're not an insider and you don't know exactly what's being done. So we can only speculate with the information we have. So regarding the event that did take place, the attempted assassination, I'm very skeptical about a lot of these events that happen like this. I have my reasons to believe um, that, well, this is how I see it. If the big dogs, the shadow figures who are the guys that actually give the official orders to the elected and selected officials, so these are the shadow figures who run the show, the cabal. I believe that if they want you taken out, you'll be taken out, period. Um, they've proven this in the past with Saddam, with Gaddafi. The list goes on. And if you're a threat to their system, they find one way or another to take you out. And it's interesting because if they could do this 5, 10, 15 years ago and take you out easily within a span of a few months, if you really are a threat to their system, well, imagine what they could do with today's technology. They can easily take you out in a day if they wanted to. So that's why I'm kind of leaning in the middle. I don't know what to believe. I think everything the media tells you, whether it's the left side, the more right conservative side, is all nonsense, in my opinion. That's what the media is there for, to give you a narrative to make sense of complexities in the world so that you have something to kind of fall for and follow and believe and to steer your emotions in one way or another for a bigger agenda. So my feelings about it is I don't know whether it was real or not, but I believe if the cabal wants you gone, you'll be gone, and that's it. We'll have to see how it plays out. Again, even the smartest people in the world, the most intelligent people, cannot predict the timing of something happening or predict the future. We can only speculate with the information we have and assume that something would happen from a probability standpoint. What is the probability something will happen? So that's how I feel about it.
Yep.
Thanks for sharing. And I want to hear your opinion, David, and then I'm going to get my thoughts on that.
So I would actually concur in a lot of ways. None of us can know what really has gone on behind the scenes or the motivation for it. I mean, it does not necessarily mean that this was set up by the right. It may not have been set up by the left, but it could be set up by various individuals like what, Vandell was bringing out there, these, shadow figures, because they are, certainly wanting to keep us distracted. And these things, as we know, have been employed excellent as distractions for the greater populace. I mean, you see the left leading media have jumped on this in a big way of blaming, Trump for this whole thing himself, questioning, whether he said it. I mean, both sides are using the spin machine like no tomorrow on, how they want to interpret the information that's out there. I mean, I listened to the press release where you had the FBI and the Secret Service and all the various police agencies come out and all say their spiel and on and on. And, even how they, somebody just happened to be there to take a picture of this guy running out of the bushes, jumped in his truck, and down the road he goes. They got a picture of his license plate and, how they follow the tags. And now they have this guy in custody. Well, I think that, after some level of interrogation, they should be able to publicly make known what the rationale was for this whole thing and who is behind it. Was he, they can pretty much find out whether he was a paid, kind of like actor in this whole thing. Interesting that the guy ran out of the bushes, leaving all of his gear behind. But apparently the reason for that is because the Secret Service agent was shooting at him and he ran for his life, so to speak. Um, ah, it just, a lot of these things to me do look to seem like the especially when you had the first assassination attempt and somebody lost their life there, and yet you had the public pointing the person out right there. There he is. There he is. And, what a failure of security. Well, it's sometimes very difficult not to have the conclusion that these things are to some degree staged, because it just seems the level of incompetence is just beyond belief. But what I want to think about is more, what is the why behind it? What is the why behind a lot of these actions? And I think the why behind it in a lot of cases has nothing to do with, the candidates themselves and who gets the popular vote and all that, because I don't care who gets in the White House. Somebody else, as far as I'm concerned, it's the central banks pulling the strings. That's what I believe.
That's
Now,
actually the fact right there.
So, from my perspective, I don't think it's about a political thing. I think it's more of a distraction. Now, there's a word out there that a lot of people, we don't hear a lot of times, and it's misdefined oftentimes, but it's the word apologetics. And it's your apology. Apologetics is, what do you believe? But more so, why do you believe it? Most people have forfeited their critical thinking. They believe things because, of course, it is in line with their political view, that they have been spoon-fed by all the very prejudices on both sides of the aisle. You take your kids, you raise them up a certain way, you send them off to university. I'll tell you what, having raised 6 kids, when they come out of a lot of these higher education institutions, they aren't the same people that they, entered into them. It's not about an education. It's about indoctrination. I have witnessed it firsthand. You might come out with a degree at the end of it, but boy, you come out with some big time, kind of like slants. And that's the way a lot of people are trained to digest information critically according to their prejudice. This is probably one of the most destructive things that we have seen in the last 20, 30 years, is the fall of critical thinking in the average person. Most times when you hear somebody actually get out there and put forth an argument, obviously, their reason for what they believe, you can almost within 3 minutes, you can hear the verbatim verbiage of what slant they have adopted through the Fifth Estate. You can literally hear it. And so this is where, I am always asking the question, why? And my conclusion is these things are real distractions from what genuinely is going on. Mm-hmm. What's genuinely moving the world forward into one of the biggest transformations that generationally we will have ever seen, probably in the last 150 years. And it's going to take most people by absolute surprise, as from what I can tell, because they are not up to speed on it. We know for a fact that they are moving us into a brand new digital style economy where it is all about control. It is not just the control of our monetary instruments, but all of our data, information, every last single thing will be tokenized. That is a fact, Jack. And it will provide such a level of control to these central banks that they have never had, nor could they have ever dreamed of having until now. And I do believe it's going to reshape the way the wide world works. And so these events, as far as I'm concerned, are keeping us, focused on something rather than focus on the undercurrents of what's genuinely going on. That's how I perceive and interpret this. So,
agreed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the three of you made great points, and it's hard to contribute with something after such great analysis, but I think there's something that hasn't been mentioned yet, which is very interesting. And if you look for the previous assassination attempt, so that guy that was over the roof, as David said very well, a lot of people were pointing out that he was there and he was ignored by the security. Mm-hmm. And now that guy was in a BlackRock commercial, right? And it happens that the one that has conducted the assassination attempt yesterday was also on a BlackRock commercial that is pro-Ukraine, right? So what are the odds? That's very intriguing.
Really?
And
no, it's true.
What I have to say, well, there are coincidences in this world, but I think that's to happen 2 times, I think it's very, it makes me to wonder, and no, we don't have the answers for why they are doing this, but yes, we can ask some questions, right? And I think David said something very relevant as well, that we have to pay attention if they are not distracting us to something happening. And well, we can see some events, right? Well, gold did a new all-time high last week, and Saudi Arabia has purchased one of the largest gold purchases in history, over 160 tons of gold. And you wake up on Monday and suddenly mainstream media is not talking about that, it's not talking about the financial markets. Every single headline is about Trump's assassination attempt. So that makes me to question the official narrative. I'm not saying it's false, but I'm also not saying it's legit. I'm just asking questions. And whenever all the attention is on the same spot, usually that's a distraction. And I also agree with what Vandell said. If they wanted Donald Trump out of power, I think he would be gone long time ago. Well, they got rid of people like Gaddafi in countries that would be much more difficult to target.
Hmm.
I mean, he's inside the US. How easy would be for the powers to take him down? So, if, in my opinion, if they really wanted him out, well, I think he would be gone long time ago. And we had the proof of that. They don't even bother to take down presidents in Africa, and that happened. If you look back in 2019, 2020, and I speak slow now to be very careful with my words. I don't want the life to have the same outcome as last week. So
Hmm.
what happened in 2019 has taught me a lot, and whoever opposed the official narrative, and when I say the official narrative, I'm talking about, I explained this, there is a spectrum where what is allowed is being discussed here, and there you have right and left, and then you have what really matters, which is on this side. And the people who actually came and say something that really matters, okay, these were the people that were taken down within like days, and African presidents that they suddenly passed away mysteriously and nobody talks about them anymore. And they were actually the people that were opposing what was happening in the world, but really opposing, okay, not in the same way as Trump, that he goes there and says something against the establishment, but behind the scenes, he's the one that has been giving all the means for them to inject you with substances, you know what I'm talking about. So I'm very skeptical about Donald Trump. I think, yes, he's the less evil, and I think you have to be outside of your mind to be in the other side. I mean, Democrats,
Yeah.
let's be honest, you have to be outside. And sorry to say that, but it has to be said. And then you have the less evil side, which in my opinion is what is the one that was almost taken down yesterday. And I'm just asking the questions. I think ultimately we don't have the answers, but I'm always suspicious of the official narrative. And I think we can
Mhm.
jump to the next subject, right? So I think the second one, yeah, so I'm just reading here. We have a list. So the SEC has admitted that they shouldn't have classified digital assets as securities, which is absolutely, I mean, it's nuts, right? It feels like we are living a simulation. It feels like the entire world is a stage. So why don't you get started, Versan, and make some comments about that?
Sure. First, I would like to touch back briefly on what my brother and you guys have said regarding the whole Trump thing. It's, I think, very important to acknowledge that this could be, we know it's a psyop to a degree, right? They're really staging this thing very meticulously and methodically. And it could be used as a distraction, because something you mentioned, David, which is very important, is that these laws are actually being put in place in the banking system. So it is important to acknowledge that. Now, what I said earlier about what the executive orders that were put into place shortly after he did become president, which you could actually look these things up. It is interesting from the other side. There are people in this space, as we know, who believe that this is that he's working through the divine, which I personally do not believe. I think this is a massive psyop in order to push these laws and accelerate this agenda, whatever it may be. And it is a distraction. And then I like what my brother said, you have to speculate with all the facts you have. And that's why I thought it was important to put those things out there, what I said about FTX, about what happened with the money being funneled through, the statements he made previously. Because if you actually go back and look into 2016, what did play out, it's weird. It's like a movie. You actually go back and there are things that he said and things that were done that we might have missed. So it's important to always go back into the past and look a little bit and do more research, and you come up with what's happening today, and you can try to put those pieces together. So, think this thing very thoroughly. But regardless of what's happening there, I think it's very interesting what's happening as far as in the financial system. So it's really interesting that the SEC has chosen this moment, right as we're witnessing the rapid digitization of the global economy and the consolidation of the financial system. And to acknowledge, that they were wrong in classifying certain digital assets as securities, ladies and gentlemen, this is not a surprise. Those who have been paying attention, especially following us, we've been discussing this openly for years. We've exposed the flaws in the past. My apologies, regarding the SEC's approach during the whole ETHgate thing. We have pinpointed out the agency's corrupt tactics involved picking their favorites, which ties us into the larger narrative of ETHgate, Ethereum, Bitcoin. So for them to finally admit this, that they've made a mistake to a degree, is not a shock. It's not a surprise. We have been telling people for a long time that this moment would eventually come, where everything would eventually unravel. The SEC would eventually backtrack because they never had the laws. They never had the facts on their side. Now, in fact, their role in the collapse of FTX, Terra Luna, and other scandals has been absolutely overlooked. We need to go back and look at those things as well. But what I find most interesting about this, and I've said this before, is not the admission itself, it's the timing, because the timing of this announcement, it aligns with very significant issues. Like JP Morgan now is facing trouble with 57 trillion in derivatives. That's not a coincidence. Central banks are also preparing for another round of quantitative easing. That is not a coincidence, which will require massive liquidity. And I think the dollar's purchasing power is now down to 3%. That's something that came from Lynette Zhang yesterday, signaling again the downfall of and inflation that we're going to see, what we're all about to feel. So while the SEC is admitting that something we saw coming, it's really the timing again that stands out. Now, everything that we see happening in the financial landscape is converging into this critical moment where digital assets are increasingly being regulated and integrated into the evolving monetary system. Bitcoin and Ethereum, which I think have long been treated like securities, should be indeed classified as such, especially considering the SEC's own conflict of interest with entities like JP Morgan, Senator Warren, and we can go on and on forever about this, but they've profited off these assets while stifling the real innovation and blocking the technologies that offer a real use case. So the shift is accelerating and we're watching it happen in real time. Those are my thoughts.
Thank you
Yeah.
for sharing, Versan. And Vandell, why don't you go ahead and share your thoughts as well?
Well, with the recent event of the SEC coming out and admittingly, saying there was a mistake there, I have to say, and I'm happy to say, we were right again, as usual, because this is what we said was going to happen, and here we are. So add that to the checklist. I do like what Ido said. While everything is unfolding and the mainstream media is pushing this narrative, that narrative, left, right, all this. Look, if you understand what the media is there for and who controls them, the 5 conglomerates, you'll understand that the media is there and controlled not to report the news, but to have an agenda and push narratives. That's their whole point, to shape perception for a specific reason. Okay, they always have an agenda and a reason. Now, what I was saying is, I love what Ido said, because he made a very good point. While all these events are unfolding and they're pushing all kinds of narratives, quite a few things have been happening in the background. And these aren't narratives. These are real things happening, okay? First of all, the global M2 money supply, I monitor this daily, and has been slowly growing. That's an indicator telling me, before the news is going to tell you, that they are about to turn on the money printing and start issuing debt. Actually, there's another chart. It's the global M2 money
I can
supply.
pull that up for you. I'll pull
And
that up.
basically, it's been slowly growing recently. And as I was saying, what that means is we are getting ready to start issuing debt and printing money. This is
Yeah.
also known as quantitative easing. So this is one of the big things happening in the background. And as a result, what's the byproduct of this? Your prices are about to continue rising. The cost of goods, the cost of services in the coming months and years because of the growth in the M2 money supply. Now, interestingly, this chart coincides with the crypto bull runs that we have every 4 years. As you can see, the big green mountain shape that you see are spread out every 4 years. That green mountain that you see is the global M2 money supply growth. And interestingly, the line above it is the Bitcoin and the crypto price. So every time the money supply increases, that's your bull run right there. And look where we are today, right now. We're just stagnant right there. And as you can see, the green mountain is slowly getting ready for growth. That's telling us what's coming. But also what Ito said was gold. A lot has happened with gold. And that's an indicator that something is breaking in the system. But they rather have you talk about the culture wars and the news. So, and that's all I have to say. But gold right now, it's been hitting new all-time highs. And that's a signal to us that something is breaking in the system and the currency or the bond market is having some issues. And we're at $2,581 per ounce. And I think we're going to make new all-time highs in the coming months and year.
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. Agreed.
Yeah, this affects everybody's life, directly affects your life.
Totally agree. Perhaps 3,000 is coming faster than we could even imagine.
Yeah.
And
Interest rates.
I would love to hear your perspective, David, and then I would just make some comments as well.
So when we see the M2 money supply increasing like that, well, what does that obviously do? Well, it devalues the currency that's already out there. And what we have seen traditionally, and maybe if there's a chart for this, I don't know, but we have seen an inverse correlation between the DXY and these digital assets. When the DXY drops significantly, we have watched this digital asset space absolutely fly. And of course, that also has an inverse correlation with the value and the price of gold as it's measured per ounce. Because when you see massive money supply, and they're not going to call it, let's be honest, they're not going to come out there and say, okay, we're doing quantitative easing. But what are they doing to increase the money supply and buying debt? Well, they're lowering the interest rates. The European Central Bank has just said, Bank of Canada did their third consecutive lower. This week, we are going to see a Federal Reserve come out, and right now it's almost baked in, but basically you got 48 to 46 or 47% or something like that. One group is saying it's going to be a 25 basis point drop. The other one's 50 basis point drop. It would not surprise me if we got a 1% drop, in that sense. But 100%, 100 basis points. The thing is this: why are they doing it? Well, the reality when it comes to genuine, true inflation is inflation's off the Richter scale already when you look at the cost of food and power, but they don't include those numbers in the CPI. Nor does the European Central Bank include them in their interest rate calculations, nor any other central bank. And it allows them to build a narrative of cheap money and to devalue the currency. Why would they ever want to devalue their own currencies? Well, it's about the consolidation of wealth. The central banks have a desire to be the lender of last resort and basically the issuer of everything. And they know that this particular system is coming to a head very, very quickly. We've seen the loss of the petrodollar, which had provided the US dollar with a world reserve currency status. And this is very old news as far as I'm concerned. A lot of people may be just waking up to the reality that the petrodollar is dead. But as far as I'm concerned, been dead for a long time. We just haven't had the impacts of it yet, and that is coming, and it is going to be a tsunami. Most people will not even be able to digest the impacts of how that is going to affect their lives in the Western world. Why? Because we have enjoyed a certain privilege around the wide world for multiple decades because of the reserve currency status, our lifestyles, our incomes, our, you name it, where other countries that have been under the underpinning of that currency, where they're, basically sanctions can be applied, this can be applied, that can be applied, on and on and on, have really suffered under that, where, now that is changing. And these powers that be, these central banks, obviously they know it. Now, if you were to go to the atlanticcouncil.org website and you were to look up a central bank digital currency tracker, you're going to see of first world nations, practically 100% of them are very far along in the development of their central bank digital currencies. We absolutely know from legislative point of view, from documentation point of view, whether it's the IMF or the BIS, Bank of International Settlements, International Monetary Fund, central banks, ECB, Federal Reserve, all these other Commonwealth central banks, their own information is telling us what they are planning for the future. One of the big key factors is when it comes to bank failures. Now, I have called this out on a number of occasions, how there are certain banks right now, big banks, that have some real weakness. Now, we just saw Warren Buffett take out a lot of his shares out of one of the major banks without naming that bank. You can look this information up. And there's a lot of people saying that there's some significant weaknesses. Why? Exposure to derivatives. Well, one thing that we have known a long, long time with respect to the XRP ecosystem, Ripple and all that, is the idea to transcend or to be, the conduit for a lot of derivatives. The derivative market is into the quadrillions of dollars. It is a significant impact on all markets. I do believe that this is where this ultimately is going to wind up. The debt market is going to be the start of it. The derivative market is going to be the end of it. And we are literally seeing a transition that is going to probably, for most people, I just don't think that most are really digesting it now. We may very well see these things send off, in ways that we haven't seen, but I do believe it's going to hit a ceiling. And when it does, that is going to be one of the biggest bubble pops that we have ever seen. And I do believe, significant corrections are on the horizon. And a lot of folks are not prepared for what's going to be coming down the road. And it's going to be a consolidation of wealth, power, and control. In fact, I don't think they're going to need to push CBDCs on people. I believe they're going to beg for them. They are going to beg for them, and they have it ready. And this is what I see. So when you're talking about the empty money supply, it's going to get to a level that is mind-blowing. Think about this, and I'll end with this. It took the United States well over 200 years to get to its first $1 trillion in debt. So that means every administration from George Bush to the Reagan administration, 1 trillion. And think about that, 100 years. Now it takes 100 days
to
spend $1 trillion. And we're doing and it's just going to get exponentially faster, where maybe we're going to be spending $1 trillion more in 30 days. But it is going to be mind-bending as to how fast they wind this thing down and destroy this currency. And we're not talking decades. We're talking maybe 2-3 years max, maybe even shorter time than that. At least that's my perspective on it.
Totally agree. Edo?
Yeah. So first, I don't really have the answer if they will cut interest rates, but I think that's very expectable. And as I always say, that's a short-term solution for a long-term problem, which is not going to solve the situation. And I think before the US elections, well, there's a chance they're going to do it now on Wednesday. That's what has been speculated. And I find very interesting, First, we have over 5,700 people live. I think we broke the new record. So thank you everyone for the support.
Incredible.
And yeah, we are the four of us here together today. So I think that's a great achievement. So to continue what I was saying, I speak to many people, and sometimes they tell me, you know what? I think it's a conspiracy that the US dollar is going to collapse, because very often I use this terminology that we are witnessing the collapse of the US dollar. Well, these people usually say that no, that's never going to happen. And the most interesting thing is that the process has already begun. And always the people telling me that that is a conspiracy theory usually are the ones that are working for $20, $30 per hour. And I wonder to myself, how many years you have to work so that you can buy your own property without asking a loan to the bank? The answer is they would have to work forever, because at the current rates, properties are out of reach for the majority of people. The fact that they will cut interest rates, even though it might signal something beneficial, that in the first hand it looks great, but the price of real estate starts to go up. But is it really going up, or is just the currency getting devaluated? That's the questions we have to ask ourselves. And the answer is, if everyone's real estate properties are going up simultaneously just because they cut interest rates, that means that we are witnessing what is called a bubble. And that's quite worrying for the middle term. Of course, that can work quite good for the short term when we're talking about stocks, digital assets as well. Of course, that can be very beneficial, and it has been on the past if we look for the historical data. But I think we overlook the fact that we transcended, in my opinion, and I also want to hear your opinion on that, but we transcended what is a recession, and I think we're getting on a depression. And a depression is not something that can be fixed in 36 months or in 24 months. Usually a depression is multi-generational, meaning that it's a change of paradigm. It's a change of that's going to affect your children. Usually, if you look for the crash of 29, right, that has been the stock market crash, it took around 25 years to make a new all-time high in the stock market in the United States. If we take the Japanese crash, I think it's called the Nikkei index. They crashed in 1989 when it was at 40,000, and it never made a new all-time high because they entered depression periods. And that's what I see with the US economy now, because they just generate more debt, and there's no way they're going to find a way to pay out that debt. Now they come in with short-term measures, and for me, it's just an indicator that we are getting on a depression. So people have to wake up, because that's not going to be solved with Trump or Biden or Kamala Harris. Whoever's going to be in power have to deal with a depression. And if you look to historical data, there's no way to solve a depression that takes 20, 30 years. So it's a whole change on the reality, especially, and that's not only for the United States. If you look for Europe, I think we are in a very similar way. Well, if you look for the definition of a recession, it's often defined as 2 or more consecutive quarters of declining GDP. And in Europe, that's quite similar. Have banks that are stagnant, like Germany, for instance. Okay, so I think it's a global situation that's affecting especially Western countries, with BRICS nations that are getting more and more powerful. And we already spoke about that recently. Even Turkey has applied to join BRICS, and I think it has been overlooked that countries like Saudi Arabia are now ditching the US dollar. They actually using Chinese yen, or Russia is using gold, and they're using all sorts of mechanisms to actually bypass US sanctions, to actually dethrone the US dollar. We all know that the only thing that has been holding the US dollar together in the past 2 decades or 3 decades has been the petrodollar. And guess what? The petrodollar is very close to an end. So it's so many factors together. If we combine, because you would argue that some people say the petrodollar would be done 20 years ago, but the fact is, now the scenario is ready. I think it's so many things coming together, and I can mention artificial intelligence, which is going to get rid of most of the jobs. I can mention that we are moving towards a cashless society, which 20 years ago was not the case. Today, it is already the case, okay? So cash is getting out of business. which ultimately is going to lead to central bank digital currencies. Nowadays we have BRICS. Every month there is a new nation, a new powerful nation that joins BRICS, and they were stagnant for a couple of years, right? It was just Brazil, Russia, China, India, and South Africa. How many BRICS nations are today? I even lost the count. Anyone knows the answer? I don't. Every month there is a new member for BRICS, and you have countries like Venezuela, which has the largest oil reserves in the world. They have more oil than Saudi Arabia. They just don't have the capability to extract this oil. So that's why perhaps Venezuela is not that much of a powerful nation. But when you are converging all these countries, and you have Venezuela's and you have Turkey, which I was there 2 months ago, and I have said this, it has the potential to become a super global potency, okay? And when you combine all of that together, you really understand that something is cooking for the US dollar, and that you have countries like Saudi Arabia, China, and Russia all coming together. And I will tell you what, they're going to unleash hell on earth against the US dollar. Actually, they already did it. And mainstream media, they just ignoring it. They're just going for the pointless arguments when there is a whole transformation. And thank you, Vandell, for just illustrating that on the screen, because that's not a narrative. That's not us asking questions and speculating. These are the official numbers. I mean, the government is giving us the numbers, and it's all there for us to see. So that's my take.
I have to actually, guys, I have to kind of jump out of the conversation right now because I have
another call.
Another call. But you know what? I just want to say this has probably been one of the best ones that we've been on, because the things that are being discussed are, as far as I can, from my perspective, are absolutely right on point with what we're saying, and the way in which what we see coming in the future. We've certainly been proven right with the things that we've said in the past, especially with this whole SEC deal and what's going down there. And I just think it's getting people educated that is one of the best things that we can possibly do, and at least turning on their own critical thinking. So absolutely fabulous conversation, guys. And I'm going to leave it to you, and hopefully we'll touch base. We'll catch up a little later on today. All right, guys.
Sounds good.
Take care, man. It was a pleasure.
Okay. All right.
Edo,
thank you, David.
Edo, I would like to also put my take in
Please go
on
ahead.
central banks cutting their interest rates, just to clarify for a lot of the people here. And I'm sure those who have been following know this, but when they lower interest rates, it makes money more accessible, but it also does devalue the currency. And that leads and translates to higher inflation. So it's pretty much a formula for a disaster that really weakens the dollar. And the only ones who truly benefit from a weakened dollar are the wealthy, who continue to get rich. So to be on the right side of this as they cut rates, whether they do or don't, but they're going to have to, because they have to sustain the debt that is unsustainable, which will accelerate the devaluation of the currency. To be on the right side, you want to be holding assets like gold and silver, because the system is just under immense pressure right now. And I think people are slowly losing faith, and this is becoming mainly clear in the mainstream as well. You see more stories on TikTok, on Instagram, of these young people who are starting to realize that they've been taken advantage of by the very same institutions they once trusted. And more people are pulling their money out of the banks, and that's why banking standard regulations are getting tighter and tighter. So as soon as the mainstream media starts picking this up, and which that is now becoming clear, that's when we're getting closer to the tipping point. And we're also at that crucial time where multiple 4-year cycles are now overlapping. Recently, the Bitcoin halving just took place, and we're on the brink of a presidential election. The timing is also fitting in perfectly with the need for debt restructuring, which is why they're going to have to cut interest rates to manage the unsustainable debt. But as they do this, it's really going to be the 1%ers who get access to the freshly printed money first. And what they do is they buy up all the assets where everyone is forced to sell because of a falling value of the dollar and rising inflation. So as people sell their assets, the 1%ers are there with that freshly printed cash to buy up everything you can't afford to own. So it's the perfect storm for the middle class, but it's a win for the top 1%. And that's why I had that chart up here for a while, is because gold remains very crucial. And I don't care what people believe. There is an intersection between the technology that we're investing in and the acquisition of physical assets. quietly accumulating gold. Every central bank around the world, including China, you saw that massive spike that took place in the last 48 hours. And we've seen a lot of movement in the gold market recently because whoever owns the most gold, and this is in the Bank of International Settlements, is going to have the largest influence in the coming monetary reset, which will again intersect with digital assets because it's all connected. And I'm not trying to boast here, but we have been right about this from the very start. Unfortunately, I think the situation is going to continue to keep getting tougher for the average individual, the Joe and Jane that is not informed like we all are here together, which is why we can constantly urge people to take action and, of course, position themselves accordingly, wisely, so you can navigate these changes and come out on top while the rest actually struggle. Now, somebody put in the comments here, what is the update? The emergency update. And it really goes back to what we talked about briefly in the beginning as far as the SEC and how all of this is aligning with the convergence of the collapse of the system, the election, et cetera, and et cetera. So when it comes to Ripple, and this is really where I'm going to put my final thoughts. The direction has been very clear for Ripple from the very beginning, ladies and gentlemen. They have been positioning themselves for a long time as the solution to the banking system, to all these issues we're talking about here. And they're the ones who are offering that cost-effective way for central banks and institutions to reduce the friction in transactions between the financial institutions. They are the ones who are really reshaping the financial landscape. I have a video I want to share with you guys. Gregory Mannarino even pointed this out the other day, that they're going to be one digital asset. And he confirmed this from the World Bank and the IMF, that they will be consolidating and tokenizing everything. That includes real estate, derivatives, debt, even medical records, history, onto a single protocol. Now, which protocol is that? We've had him on the show multiple times and talked to him about this. It's Ripple's protocol. It's the technology. So this isn't really new information. It's just we're continuing to update people on the actual how things are playing out in real time. It's further confirmation of what we've all together have been saying here for years. Ripple is growing exponentially. There's no real competition for the digital asset space that relies on these institutions to settle these transactions. So XRP and XLM, said this many times, XRP is designed to handle the institutional liquidity and settlement and other things, while XLM is really focusing on the peer-to-peer transactions and banking the unbanked. That's their initiative. And I can guarantee you, and I hate saying this, but a year from now, somebody is going to be claiming what we're talking about right here as breaking news. But we're saying it here right now. These technologies are complementary towards each other. And as for CBDCs, where does CBDCs intersect? I get this question all the time. CBDCs intersect in another fashion. It's a closed system, but it's a platform that central banks are building upon the XRP ledger for central banks to issue a CBDC. And central bank digital currencies are different, but interconnected in some way, form, and fashion, which will contribute to the value of the ledger as well, the technology. CBDCs being a closed system. And I hate to say this, guys, I am not a black pill guy like some of these people call me here, or doom and gloom. I'm a realist, okay? This is what the facts say. This is what the data says, that there is a predetermined solution for majority of the population that are falling into poverty as a result of currency devaluation. And that's why I believe that as people get deeper into debt just to survive, just to get by, there's going to be that predetermined solution for this. Like David said, they'll be begging for it. There are going to be winners, there are going to be losers, and that's just the nature of the system. And it's unfolding as exactly we expected. So the shift is well underway. Sorry, Vandell. I'm going to play this video, guys, let you hear it, and then I'll let you guys talk. Sorry to hijack a majority of the conversation, but I thought it was necessary. I have so much to say. Guys, this will take a second. I'm sorry. Whew. Okay. I think you're on mute.
Yeah, I just realized. So
One
just for
second,
the
guys.
record, we just hit 7,000 people watching live, and I just wanted to share that with the audience. So thank you, everyone. Well, we're
Thank you.
slowly
Thank
getting
you.
here.
That's very good, but that's not enough. We need 1 million. I see 2 million watchers on somebody jumping out of an airplane. This is life-changing, for God's sakes.
Oh
Okay, let
man,
me play this
you
clip,
were
guys.
actually too nice. I have seen worse things than jumping out of an airplane getting enough views as well.
It will be quick. All right. Here.
This
Yeah.
system is going to be the universal one world, new world order system. Currently, we're almost done. And please look, what I'm about to say to you here, all right? Specifically this last part right here. I want you to look into this yourself. Don't believe a thing I wrote here. Does this sound like science fiction to you? It might. But when you do your own research into this yourself, you'll see that what I have said here, I didn't just come up with this out of my head. You understand? Anyway, do your own research here. Currently, the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, and the Bank of International Settlements are diligently working towards implementing this new, entirely token-based cross-border trans-world system, which will be used to track, trace, log, monitor, market, control, and consolidate, and therefore reduce everything into a tradable token, a token which itself can be reduced into nothing than what it actually will be. A thing serving as a representation of something else. And then I write here at the end, and just when you thought that things could not possibly become even more bizarre.
Yep.
Was I on mute this whole time? Please tell me no.
Yeah, but it's fine because Gregory was talking.
No, not the Gregory part. Before that, was I on mute when I was
No.
talking that whole? Okay.
So
Woo, thank God. All right.
he made a good point. Yeah.
You guys, I encourage you to watch the whole video. I will put it in the link in the description once this is uploaded. And I encourage you to watch it because he goes way more into detail. And it's pretty much what we've all been discussing here: tokenization, transnational, cross-border system. And again, it comes down to the protocol, the technology underneath all of it. And that's really what Ripple is offering. Interestingly, it's Ripple that leverages the digital asset XRP to transmit that value around. And everything seems to be built on that very protocol, the rules that set the transactions to take place and occur. So I think I've covered enough over there. And Vandell, also real quick, somebody did ask for you to explain the interview you did with Bellwether. That guy has been attacking us for years and he doesn't have the facts, guys. And I'll let him explain that. So,
well, there isn't much to explain. It's kind of difficult to have a constructive dialogue and conversation with somebody that doesn't understand what they're talking about. So, with that being said, after the first few minutes, I had a feeling of where the conversation was going to go, and that was nowhere.
agreed.
So, I got to a point where I didn't feel like I needed to elaborate and dive deeper into elaborating on certain aspects of XRP ledger, the XRP liquidity aspect, how they'll generate fees, the fact that, there is a limited supply, it's only going to be reduced. There will be a demand supply shock because there were certain things that he thought he knew what he was talking about, but he did not. And I just felt at that point that, okay, this is not a debate. This is an attack with probably all good intentions he had, but that was not a professional dialogue and open debate and conversation. And simply because if you're going to talk about a specific subject, at least be knowledgeable on the subject you're talking about, so that the conversation can be constructive back and forth. And he didn't know. For example, he said banks aren't using XRP. I stayed quiet because, yeah, they are using XRP. Why is the price not going up? There's multiple reasons. Net inflow has not increased. So they are using XRP right now, but the amount they're using for facilitating liquidity and transactions is not enough to shoot the price up with the limited supply available. We need more net inflow, more. When more comes in, which more will come in through utility and adoption, more net flow, higher the price goes. The amount of flow, net flow right now going back and forth within that system is not enough to shift the price much higher at the moment. Another thing is liquidity pools. Okay, this will create a demand supply shock eventually, because again, it goes back to economics 101, supply and demand. You have a limited supply, demand increases. As institutions use XRP to facilitate liquidity as a financial instrument, well, guess what? The supply will be reduced. Why? Because in order for them to utilize XRP, they have to hold it and keep it. So they're not going to be putting it back on the market. They're going to be buying it and never selling it back on. Why wouldn't they sell it back on? Because it's not made for shallow trading. It's made as a financial instrument for liquidity purposes. So they'll buy it and keep it. And over time, institutions would just buy, hold, and then that's a supply and demand shock. There's multiple reasons. Exchanges have limited supply. Since 2019, Ripple has not gave any XRP to any of the exchanges. So the supply is diminishing over time. It's a gradual process. There's many things, but I just didn't feel the conversation was constructive. And I was speaking to somebody that didn't know much about gold, because he did claim gold didn't hold its value. And that's 100% false. And I'll tell you why. 10 kilograms of gold in 1929 would buy you one brand new house. Fast forward today, 2024, that same amount of gold, 10 kilograms of gold, will buy you 2 houses today, plus a barbecue pit. The average home today is about $500,000 in America. That same amount, 10 kilograms of gold, would buy you 2 of those. So how are you going to tell me gold did not hold its value? People don't understand this. Peasants don't get this. They want people to not get this. Gold is the anchor and measure of all things. That's a banker's secret for you right there. And they don't want you to know that. That's why they've been accumulating since 2010, because it's the anchor and measurement of all things, and it's the only thing that holds its value until we have this new asset class of chosen digital assets.
Very nicely said, Vandell. And if I may share a quote that Robert Kiyosaki shared with us off record once. He said, "You can't teach stupid poor people about money." And I totally agree with him.
So there's your answer.
100% agree. And I would add something very quickly, Vandell, of what you said. A lot of people actually ask me the same question. If banks are using XRP, why the price is not going up? Well, there is something about the capabilities of the XRP ledger, about the greatest feature of XRP, which is ultimately payments, ultimately settle transactions in 3 seconds, which doesn't make a favor to its price appreciation, because it settles down in 3 seconds. So now you can settle hundreds, thousands of transactions, and institutions can just swap it back, and they don't necessarily need to hold it, okay? But that will change. And why I say that? Because of the dynamics of nostro-vostro accounts. So basically, imagine if every central bank in the world is obligated to hold a certain amount of XRP in their balance sheet. What's going to happen to XRP price? And that ultimately is tied to everything that Ripple always envisioned for XRP, which is to replace nostro-vostro accounts. If you go through the old documents, you will find references to become a world reserve currency. You will find documents making cases for replacing nostro-vostro accounts, which ultimately eliminates a lot of the friction that we have in the system with international cross-border payments. And I think everyone is just ignoring it. And yes, it's true. The price of an asset really comes down to one simple denominator. And sometimes people, they make so much noise around it, and they talk market cap, and they see charts, and they see this and that. And honestly, it's one simple denominator: supply versus demand. If there's enough demand and the supply is shorter and doesn't meet the demand, guess what happens? The price increases. And that's why we don't have exactly on this moment price appreciation, because as Vandell explained, we don't have that much. Yes, there are hundreds of financial institutions, even nations using XRP on this moment, but still doesn't meet the requirements to increase the price, but that will change once they implement a whole new system, once you have tokenization on the equation and you have the derivatives market tokenized and you have properties, because also XRP can tokenize. And ultimately, Nostro Vostro accounts are going to be the key. And as you guys know my opinion, I am a huge believer that also a portion of the XRP escrow has been allocated to financial institutions such as the Bank of International Settlement and the International Monetary Fund. Okay, so I think I recommend everyone to do your own research about what these two key institutions have been saying about digital payments.
Can I just say
and
one thing
if I-
real quick?
Real quick,
Sorry.
I would like to touch on the escrow
He-
thing because
oh,
people.
Okay, go
Vandell?
ahead.
Yeah, real quick. I'm sorry, guys. But in conclusion to what Edo said about the escrow, Ripple strategically releases XRP from escrow. They don't do that to manipulate prices or to flood the market, as some people have speculated. But it's really designed to enhance the liquidity and also foster the partnerships, like you said, allocate it for other central banks, other purposes. And that is naturally just going to drive the adoption of the technology. So just understanding that broader perspective is very crucial to addressing